All right, welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections podcast. So happy that you had pressed play here. I'm humbled to be your host, Mike Cunningham, the National Business Development Manager for Gill Athletics. Now, the kind of crazy part about this is you already know who today's guest is. That's probably why you pressed play. But I'm hoping our goal today, we talked about this before we hit record, is to maybe bring you a little different side of the story. So help me welcome from the great state of Kentucky, really not only obviously he was pretty fast, but a pretty good dude. And we're going to learn an actually excellent dad. Help me welcome the wise and wonderful Mr. Casey Combest. Casey, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Kentucky's not far from where we are here in Illinois, and so we go into Kentucky quite often. So it's always good to have a Kentucky guy. I feel like I'm from Alabama, so I kind of feel like we're kind of one of the same.
Right.
So Casey, it's really always interesting when I have a guest here on the show that has their own Wikipedia page, because there's a lot of history you can go and just Google to find out your backstory, the many things that you accomplished. You were under some amazing coaches throughout your career. So instead of going through athletically your career, although I would like to make sure guests know it was 24 years ago and it still stands today that this man set the national high school 60-meter record. It's amazing to set a record. It's amazing to set a record that lasts 24. Well, it's still going 25 years. Who knows when that thing's going to get broken? So I just want to make sure we do know a little bit of his athletic background. But Casey, I'm interested with you when you think about your high school career and post that. We're all about uplifting and honoring coaches and the positive impact that they make on young people. What's a coach or coaches that stand out to you when you think about the many men and maybe women that poured into you as a coach into your athletic and personal career?
Well, I think it all started in 1988, and when Ben beat Carl, I didn't even realize my father even ran track. And then I went into his room and I discovered some medals in his room. And then I asked him, I thought they were, I didn't know if he was in the war. I didn't know what they was, but he finally told me that he was a track star. And I think just the excitement of seeing my dad jump off the recliner when Ben beat Carl in 976 or 978, it was just like, man, that's what I want to be. And I can remember the next day going to school and telling, my best friend, when I grew up, I want to be the next King Carl or Ben, and then coming home and then my dad, we started going to the track and he was wanting to break a mile. At 31 years old, he was wanting to go under 5 minutes. So I was jogging with my dad, when I was 8 years old. And then he knows I had some speed. So he taught me how to come out of starting blocks. And I can remember the first time I ever did the starting blocks. I said, man, I don't like this. This don't feel right. And he said, well, you're going to look awful stupid when you get older being on the line with no starting blocks. So you're going to have to learn how to come out of these things. And from that moment on, man, I just kept working at it 10 a day, 20 a day, 50 a day. By the time I was in high school, I was doing like 200 starts a day. So that was my first introduction to track and field, was watching Ben and Carl, and then my dad introducing me to the sport.
How did dad, as he was, the intro coach to you, your first coach, was he going off instincts, how he was coached? Back then, we didn't have all these YouTube and all the kind of stuff we have now. Where was he getting his guidance of how to guide his son?
Well, to be honest with you, my dad's was a 3-time state champion in the quarter mile. Wow. And his uncle coached him. Well, his uncle back in the 70s didn't know anything about track. He just was just a teacher at the school. So he called USC and got some workouts. And that's how we started learning about intervals and the blocks and et cetera, et cetera. So it all started with my dad and my uncle teaching him, and then he just kind of taught me what he knew, as far as he was advanced on what he knew. Mm-hmm. And then I just took it from there. And then later on, I met Bob O'Brien, who had graduated from Ball State University, and we kind of linked up at the same time because I moved towns to Owensboro from where I was born in Henderson, and then his first coaching job was me, and he was fresh out of college. So I mean, he taught me how to do drills. He ran every interval with me. He pushed me, and from from his coaching, we went on for till I was a senior in high school.
So he was your high school coach until senior year?
All the way through high school, yes.
All the way through high school. How was it? I'm always interested in kids that are coached, especially in track, by their dads first, and then they get the full-time coach, the high school coach here with Bob O'Brien. How was it adjusting to that? Because it's one thing to be, being coached by your dad, which we're going to learn more about here in a little bit with your own experience of that, is different than another man or woman. They're not related in that case. How did you adjust to the full-time coach? I assume he did some things differently than dad and uncle.
Well, one thing he did differently is, my dad coached me in the summertime. Once in high school. My dad was the overseer of what we did, but Bob was, even though he was my coach, he was a lot like my training partner. And then, let's just give an example. On Tuesdays, I would run 10 times 200 and 28 seconds, 27 seconds, where he would give me a 4-minute recovery in between each point, where with my dad, he'd only give me 48 seconds recovery. So there was a big difference in taking it to another level. I like to think that when I got with my dad in the summer, I went to another level because I was in better shape.
But probably went to a different level of also throwing up. I mean, that's a tough workout.
I threw up every day for 3 consecutive years, and a lot of kids on my team, even their parents, would ask me, see me at track practice picking their kids up, and they'd say, what do you do that for? Why are you doing that for? And I used to tell them the same reason why you come to see me run on Saturday. This is what it takes if you want to see me perform at that level. And I knew that then, because I didn't put the work in. I didn't throw up.
Yeah,
I felt like King Kong out there at the time.
That's a great response. Well, that's why you come to see me on Saturday, because I do this. That's right. I like that. Where did the idea of, and we don't get into X's and O's all that too much here, because I haven't coached in 17 years, so it would be inauthentic for me to talk about coaching. But you talked about, and I've heard you say it before, 200 starts a day. That's a lot. Where did that idea of like, okay, I'm going to be really good at this, which means I'm going to put in a lot of time and effort into this?
Well, I'm a student of the game. I used to study guys like Armin Harry, Charlie Green, Ben Johnson. So I knew that, and like I said, going back to that day one with my dad, it felt awkward to me. So I knew that was a weak link in my track. So that I needed to work on that. I knew that the speed was there, the endurance was there. I would do any workout you wanted, but my weakest link was the start. So, a lot of nights, I would just get in my car and just go to the track and just do starts and run out 10, 15 yards and come back. Run out 10, 15 yards and come back. A lot of people would think that was crazy, but I wanted to create the start faster than anybody.
I don't know if you're go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I mean, all I could do is know this. If I can get out on them, then that thought in others, other sprinters' mind when the race goes off. If I could get that jump on them, and if they even blink to think, it's a wrap. I got it.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons why I worked on it so hard.
I'm not sure if you're a reader, but there is an author who's actually is a track fan. His name's Malcolm Gladwell. And he's an amazing writer and podcaster. I highly recommend him for anybody. But one of the books he wrote was called Outliers. And it talked about people that excelled like way more than even the greatest, right? Like, I mean, the true 1%ers of 1%. And he talks about this study of the 10,000 hours, that to be really good at something, it takes on average 10,000 hours. So the violinist that wants to be the first chair of the Boston Philharmonic, the number one orchestra in the world, it takes him or her 10,000 hours to get good to even start there. I think about that because I think about your 200 starts and you're starting all the time and every day, like you were working on your 10,000 hours. You were perfecting that craft of the starting and the starting block.
Yeah, I used to call myself the 40-hour starter.
40
40
hours.
hours a week starting.
40
Yeah.
hour starter. I love it. I love it. I love it. So how was that? You mentioned Bob is like kind of like a training partner as well for you. What impact did he make? We talked about dad, gave you the spark when you saw his medals. What impact did Bob make on you in your high school career?
Uh, at times, he would say little things that could just ignite me. I can remember one time we were at Kentucky Invitational, and he he says to me, "The sky's the limit." I mean, uh, but I always had this rule, like if I didn't break a record or if I didn't come close to what I ran last week, I felt like I let myself down. So it was always this ongoing thing to want to be better than I was last week. And he was always good at having me ready and, giving me good advice and motivate me. My dad was the king of the motivating. I can remember getting in the car, driving 2 hours, and before I got into the arena, I was ready to go to war. I mean, it wasn't a matter I didn't like anybody in the building. It was a matter of I'm going in here to get this respect. I want people to know what I do. And if there's a record or a field house record, I'm going to get it. And that was the mentality, uh, almost like a boxer, entering the ring. It was personal.
Sounds like you had a lot of trust in those two as your coaches.
Well, I mean, they put a lot of time in with me. They were my mentors, and they wanted to see me do good. And I wanted to perform good for them. I wanted to make them look good, because my dad was just a guy that worked at the railroad for 41 years who didn't go to college, who had scholarship because he had children, and he put that life on hold for him. So a lot of times before I got in the line, I thought about my dad. I thought about my grandfathers. I thought about some of them that were in my life that were passed on, where your average person on the line is not thinking about a funeral or this and that. It run deep, and I felt like I represented those people.
I like that. Now, after high school, and again, we don't necessarily need or want to get into specifics, but I know you did have some running after high school. In fact, you worked with a couple of people that I know near and dear to my heart, actually. Marshall Goss at Indiana University. I know you had a little bit of a relationship with him, a lot of almost proximity for him because how close you were to Bloomington. And then Stan Naruski down at Wallace as well, dear friend of mine. What was the role of coaches post high school as you continue to kind of find your way in the right footing and where you're going to move on towards?
Well, after my senior year, my grades wasn't very good, and I pulled my hamstring, and I really wasn't school oriented. I mean, and then when I look back on it, I wish that I was, because my life would have been a whole lot different today. But I can remember getting in trouble, and my lawyer says to me, he says, "Man, there's the telephone. Pick up a phone and call some university and say they give you a scholarship, and maybe we can get this trial extended and show you got good grades. You changed your life. You moved away." So I can remember calling Stan Naruski, and anybody that knows Naruski knows he can talk. So I tell him my situation, and he says to me, "Well, when you coming?" And I knew it at that moment right there. He wasn't judging me. He was going to try to help me. So I arrived in Huntsville, Alabama, in the middle of nowhere, and he was there, and he accepted me. And to tell you the truth, he's one of my favorite coaches, Stan Naruski. He's I call him the character. He's something else. He always made me laugh. He always made me smile, and he was there when I needed him the most. And I can remember in August, before I left to come see him, I said, "Coach, if you now you gotta remember I've been off a year. I done pulled my hamstring and got in trouble. I'm stressed to the max." But I tell Naruski, I say, "Listen, if you give me a scholarship, I'll get you 10 points at the national championships." And so when I arrived, I went right back to what I knew as a kid. I go in the little auditorium that they had over there, and I just started working on my starts. And then when the Riskies practice was over, I'd go back and do it. And then my roommate was Obi Moore. So me and Obi, we practiced a whole lot on our own time in Hansfield because there wasn't much to do. It was just a small town in the middle of Alabama, you know.
Yeah.
And then I actually got my assistant coach was Ed Witt, and for Naruski,
Mhm.
good guy. He would drive from Nashville, Tennessee, every day to Huntsville, and I learned a lot about balance with him. And what I mean by that is which leg's stronger than the other. So we take 5 yards, take a stopwatch, hobble on one leg and time it, and then do the other leg and time it. So if it's not consistent, then one leg's weaker than the other. So that was one thing that I picked up on from Coach Witt. And question of Ruski, I just owe him a lot of thank yous for what he did for me, because I ended up winning the national championship. But it was hard for me to from where I come from in the city to living on a cornfield.
Yeah.
It was just difficult for me in the process that I was going through, you know, doing some jail time and stuff. So, but no, Naruski was my guy.
And that's our first time that you and I's paths crossed, because I was coaching at a junior college in Kansas. And, you know, it's striking to me that someone from Kentucky is calling a place in Alabama small. That tells you how small Huntsville is. It really is tiny. And I was in Huntsville equivalent over in Kansas coaching a junior college, and we're at Kansas State for the indoor junior college nationals, and you win the 60. And I remember I caught up because, you know, I'd been friends with Stan forever up to that point, even. So I knew it was okay if I, you know, talked to his athlete, you know, you. And so I just caught up to you and I was like, hey, congratulations. And you're real nice. You're a good young kid. You know, you're like, yes, thank you. And I said, you know what? The sport's better with you in it and winning. And you said, I agree. It just cracked me. You're like, I agree. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, good. But I stand by that. I stand by that. So let's fast forward here a little bit, because what's interesting to me, what we're about to learn here in your current role, if you will, current roles, some of that story you just told, I'm curious how it's playing out today. So for those of you listening who don't know, Casey has a son. What grade is he going? Is he into now?
He's a sophomore this year.
Sophomore. Okay, I thought sophomore. So he's got a sophomore named King, by the way, which I love. There are enough Mikes and Dans and Steves in the world, so I love a good name. So King is awesome. Bravo. And King has got some talent, which you might guess because, you know, you can't beat genetics, and, you know, he's got pretty good genetics here, right? So first of all, give us the 30,000-foot level about King and your coaching him. Kind of catch us up to today as a sophomore. You know, when you first noticed he was going to be a sprinter, did you force him into being a sprinter? Did he know who you were? If that makes sense.
You know, I got to tell the truth here. I mean, you know, I've been telling everybody that King gonna be the world's fastest man before he's even born. I mean, I kind of predicted that.
That's a heck of a prediction. Okay.
And a lot of people think I named him King to be cocky, but the truth of the matter is my grandfather was last name King, and that's who my father got his genes from, and that's who I got my genes from. So I figured, you know, with the third generation, it's King Combest. So that's why I named him King.
Love it.
But around 4 years old, he could jump off couches, jump on beds, run around the block tremendously, faster than any 4-year-old that I had run across. He didn't even need training wheels on his bicycles, so he had great balance. So I started teaching him to start around.
Of course you did.
And
can I guess that his first Christmas gift was like a set of blocks right off the bat?
Well, we actually made him starting blocks out of 2x4s.
Nice.
And we started working on that. But I was getting trained by Trevor Graham at the time that he was born.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he actually did his first start in an elevator in a hotel room. So and then we just went from there.
Awesome.
But King has outrun every one of my times as for his age right now. And he's a whole lot. I call him the supreme version of Casey. He's a lot stronger. He's a great kid. He's not has no ego. He has no background of anything that's gonna harp him. He's a good kid. He's got a 4.0. he trains her like I do, and he believes in what he does, and I'm just backing a champion in the making.
So he grew up around you running, and so he didn't like one day as a 8-year-old come across a newspaper article online or anything like that and was like, "Hey, Dad, were you a sprinter?" He knew from the jump, like, "Oh, this is what my dad does. He's a sprinter. He's a track guy."
Well, being from where we're from and small towns or where we go, he gets asked a million times, you faster than your daddy? You faster than your daddy? Which I always used to say to him, yeah, he's faster than me. That's the king. That's the king. So
Nice.
I don't really ego myself, team, but I always bump King up to everybody. And I think King bought into believing that he's the king and that one day he's going to be a world class sprinter.
Hmm.
And every day he worked on his craft. And I never really told him much about what I've done. Honestly, he looks it up on the internet. He's seen a lot of stuff about me, my documentaries, blah, blah, blah. But I've always tried to make it about King. Like I died a long time ago and you're reborn. You're the guy that's doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I told him when he was young, I'm going to teach you everything that I know. And if I don't know, I'll seek and find so that I can teach you the right way. And, being around world-class sprinters, especially Trevor, even though, things went the way they did with him, I learned a ton of knowledge from him. I spent 8 weeks with him. It was like a sponge soaking up water. I mean, I remember damn near every word he said. And a lot of that I've passed on to King. And like I never ran a dry phase. Like when you're 657, I didn't run no dry phase.
Right.
So a lot of things that I've learned, I didn't put it into what I knew. I took the knowledge and I put it into King. And so far it's working pretty good.
Are you exclusively coaching him, or does he also have like a high school coach, or how's that relationship?
But the problem is every time that he gets on a high school team, it's not nothing against or disrespect for the high school coaches that are around our area. They don't know much. They might be a music teacher or a PE teacher that's getting an extra $3,000-$4,000 to coach the track team. And when you've been training somebody like I have since they've been 12 months old, they need to get on our level. We don't want to get on their level because we're trying to proceed to the Olympics. That's our ultimate goal. So I run into a lot of troubles with the schools. You're a parent. You don't need to come out here. I can't have parents coming out here telling me what to do, blase, blase. But yet you go into the library getting a book on how to do the stuff.
Right.
So my point is that, I run King unattached. We try to run a lot of college meets. We try to run in the big meets as well. But our pursuit is to break 657. And I feel like I'm the best guy for that job for right now. Now, as things get older, like I told King, I don't mind to turn you over to somebody like a Lance Brahman or somebody that knows what's going on, but I can't turn you over to a local coach that don't know. It's not going to get you to the level you need to be at.
Right. Yeah, I completely understand that. And, I have a lot of empathy for high school coaches around the country. I've interviewed a lot of them and obviously done business with a lot of them. First of all, very unfair comparison to say the average high school coach to the experiences and coaching that you've had, right? I mean, we're not talking about someone who was good in high school. We're talking about someone who was the best actually in high school. So that's a tough comparison there. And then, we realize our high school coaches are teachers and they're also moms and dads. I mean, there's a lot going on. So I completely understand that. I would feel a little, I don't care how good of a high school coach I was, I would feel a little, what's the word?
Intimidated.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, oh, Combest, I remember that name. And then you come out, I'm like, oh crap, you're his dad. Oh man. Yeah,
I get
that's
that all
tough.
the time.
Sure. Yeah. That's a little tough. That's
But
like
I tell all these coaches, just ride the wave, man. You're gonna meet all kinds of college coaches. You can get all the glory in the newspaper. I don't need any of that stuff. I
that's
just
a
want
good
to help
point.
our destination. But a lot of them, they don't want to buy into that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, what's it like, when a high school coach is coaching a kid, and especially in track and field, there can be a lot of emotions, and I mean that in the right way of like, you have a disappointing practice, or you just can't hit the mark that you're trying to hit, and frustration. Maybe you get a little upset with coach, maybe coach gets a little upset with you, but you both then typically go on your own way. The kid goes home and does his homework and eats dinner and gets ready for the next day. Coach goes home to him or her family, et cetera, et cetera. you and King don't have that luxury. If you guys have a little head buddy and you both go home, how do you deal with, like, do you try to set dad aside when you're on the track, or which is impossible to do that 100%, by the way, or do you recognize that, hey, I know I'm coaching and everything, but I'm also dad on the track? How do you balance that role when you're actually training?
Well, it's funny you said that because I've told King this, and he'll tell you this too. When we get to the track, I always say, I'm not dad no more. I'm coach now. But my son respects me. He looks up to me. He knows that I got the record, and he knows what it means to the sport, to me. So we really don't have any type of problems like that. He knows I'm a strainer. So I mean, every morning at 4:30, my son gets up and does 500 sit-ups, 250 push-ups before he eats breakfast, and then he goes to school. He does his little weight meal at school, and then at 3:30 we go to the track, and we really don't. Even though he's my son, it's kind of he's my best friend. So we got this relationship where it's like he knows who I am and I know who he is. So he's constantly bragging on me, but yet I'm constantly bragging on him. So it's a different situation. It's kind of like Dion and his son. We're just we're together on this.
Yeah.
But it's really about him now, not about me.
When you look back, you talked about your dad as your coach, Bob as your coach, Stan. When you look back at the coaches who've had influence over Trevor, that have had influence over you, who do you feel like you most align with when you're coaching King? And what I mean by that is like, do you run all the workouts with him like Bob? Are you able to make him smile and laugh like Stan? What do you feel like you're most influenced by coaches to your style now with him?
Well, I mean, high school coaches are different, because they don't know the level of intensity as a pro coach, or how important it is to sleep a certain amount of time, or to eat, or to rest, or to hit speed work at this point, or endurance at this point, weights at this point, plows at this point, intervals, etc., etc. So I always try to take what Coach Graham taught me, and whereas this is life or death, this is serious, and there's no going back to tomorrow. We don't have time. So I have King's schedule already written out before for the entire year of what we're going to do. I'm not one of these coaches that shows up and says, "Well, what are we going to do today?" I already know what we're going to do today.
Right.
And King can verify this as well. I almost tell him what he's going to run before he runs. I almost already know the time before we even walk in the building because we've done it in practice. So, I mean, that helps a whole lot. That way I'm not feeding him some kind of BS to where he can think, well, if I didn't run that fast, then that lowers his self-esteem. I try to keep it real with him and set the bar high because we train hard.
I'm glad you brought that part up because I wanted to make this connection as well. So you had mentioned that when you went into any field house for a competition, that if you didn't PR, you felt like you let your family down, your coach down. You felt bad about it. Like I should have PR'd every time. And you realize, and that's you as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, you now know as an adult, like I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's impossible to PR every single time you step on the track. How do you handle those expectations with King? You're in a much older, wiser age and stage today than you were as a 17-year-old, but now you're working with a 15-ish year old who may think, if I don't PR, well, then I let everybody down, when we know that's not the truth because it's a progression towards the big breakthroughs. How do you handle that as, well, not only as coach, but as dad?
Well, I tell him, you can control your own destiny out here. We put in all this work. It's a war. And, you're talking to somebody that broke 76 records out of 77 races in my lifetime. So I tell King this all the time. Life is a fight. It's a war. And these people don't show up to see you win, King. They show up to see you lose. So at the end of the day, you got to be razor sharp. And when you ain't working, those boys in Texas are working. They're working in Cali. So it's a constant reinforcement of being ready. Now, even though we may not PR every time, which King has PR'd 18 out of 19 races, we're primed, we're ready, we're living it. When we leave the track, we just don't say, okay, father and son deal. Our life is based on track every day, all day. I love him if he never ran a track meet at all. He's my best friend. But he chose this. This is what he bought into with me a long, long time ago. And the mentality is we're not backing down from nobody. We're coming. And we're not afraid to run nobody. And that's why I run him in when he was in middle school. I mean, elementary, I ran him in middle school meets. When he was in middle school, I ran him in high school meets. When he's in high school, I ran him in college meets because I'm preparing him for the ultimate battle, which is years from now. So we're just in the moment, as they say, and we're trying to create moments. But being sharp every day with the starts, with the mind, and knowing you done went through hell and back to get where you're at today, that it's a war. And it's no different than, like I tell him, if you signed up for the army and they put you in a plane and jumped you out 18,000 feet in the air, you know, there's a war going on. Are you ready? Put me on the front lines. And that's what I've instilled in King. And King's not scared to run anybody because he's prepared. So that's one of the things that me and him are the same on. And, you know, is that if we were mowing grass, we're going to try more grass than anybody ever mowed.
That is competitiveness there. I love that. Casey, as you were growing up through the ranks, I have to imagine as you first time you broke 670, 669, 668, there started becoming a target on your back. It's like, well, this kid's not going to run 667, and then you'd go out and run 667. And I have to imagine King has a lot of things that would maybe potentially put a target on his back. First of all, his name is King, right? Let's just be honest with you. That automatically maybe puts a target on your back. His last name, so his first name is King, his last name is Combest. that maybe puts do you guys get, when you're going to these meets, do you feel more love from people, or do you get more pushback on people?
Well, it definitely helps that I've had a past in track. It opens the door a lot because, you know, almost every meet director or promoter knows or heard of me. So that helps us get in the doors. There's a lot of other coaches that maybe have an athlete that they don't like the fact that I coach him, and that but they're not openly going to say that, but I've heard it, you know. But at the end of the day, we've had pretty good response. And
Good.
I try to be as nice and as upfront as I can be with meet promoters and other coaches. But Kentucky has a good group of people running Kentucky track, like at KY Track XC, Tim King, Frank McClovick. You know, I go back 30 years with Frank McClovick. He opened the door for me everywhere I went when I was before the internet and all that. He knew everybody. I used to call him, I used to say, man, you know everybody. But we try to just entertain people with the talent that we have, and hopefully we inspire a whole lot of people. You know, King doesn't get caught up. You know, he gives autographs, he takes photos with lots of people, but he's humble. He's the kind of guy that knows what he's there for, which I respect that about him, because a lot of kids would get the big head and this and that. But no matter where we go or how much success we had, it's always back to the drawing board on Monday. Let's get back. That's over with. This is the new deal. So we try not to let negativity get into our training.
Good. That's what I was first of all, I was hopeful that there'd be more positivity than negativity. We're never going to be 100%, but I would just hope, just from in general of track and being acceptance of people, that you'd be welcomed, and then therefore your son would be welcomed. And, you know, we let the chips fall where it may when it comes to the track. That's what's great about this sport, is we're going to find out who the fastest is. We're going to line up and see what happens. And then, you know, so I hate just figure out who got first, who got second. Right. So I love that you have that.
If somebody outrun you, got to tip your hat to them, because you don't work your butt off.
Exactly. If you did everything possible, what else can you ask for? That's exactly right. So, Casey, you know, it's just interesting, this lineage of your dad coaching you and you now coaching King. When you take a step back from it, you know, take a step back from the track, take a step back from sitting at the dinner table, what's it mean to you to be his coach, his best friend, and his dad?
It means everything that I ever had in my life. Without him, I'm nothing. You know, he's the reason why I'm still here. He gives me strength. He gives me energy. He gives me love. He gives me respect. He's my son. Like I tell him all the time, man, I lay my life down for you because I love you. And I think he'd do that for me. He's a special kid. I can say that. I've got other kids, but he's number one with me. Not because he can run, just because he's my best friend. You know, we hang tight every day, all day. We go everywhere together. Uh, and you would think that, you know, we get tired of one another, but really we feed off one another.
Win or lose, it's King and Casey together. And I bet there's more winning than losing going on there.
Well, we're like I said, we're gonna be prepared to win. If somebody beats us, we got to tip our hat to them. But we're gonna come back the next week. We're gonna be looking for where you're running. You know.
So as we start to wrap up here a little bit, Casey, what is the end goal here? Is the end goal for you to help him get a college scholarship? I know you mentioned the Olympics. Is that the end goal? Is the end goal for, you know, a lot of dad, you know, I'm a dad of two. So my end goal is a little bit fuzzier in the sense of like, my end goal is like, oh, I want your life to be better than what my life was. What is your end goal when you're thinking about your relationship with King?
Well, my end goal is, and my only goal is for King is to be able to get a college degree, because I got all this knowledge and I can't do anything with it because I don't have a degree. And it's sad because we put all this time in it. You're talking about those 10,000 hours that guy said. You know, we got lots more than 10,000 hours into this in 3 generations. And, you know, my dad, he went to work for the railroad. He didn't have a degree. So it's been hard for me surviving, taking care of my family, and trying to do what's right, and keep it positive. So I always tell him, you know, I'm a second-rate citizen because I can't make the wages and do the things that a lot of families out here do with their kids. And I think, but in this other aspect, I spend my time with him. Mm-hmm. So we have a lots of time. We talk about everything under the sun together. But at the end of the day, I think my son could be coaching in the future because he's a student of the game. He's I like to think he's learned from some of the best minds in the country. And whether he gets 657 or not, which I believe he will, we want to keep that 60 meters in the Combest family. And if we can make it to the Olympics or make it on the pro scene, he can make a living and around the world and meet lots of people. And you know, we live in a different world today. There's social media and fans, and just the vibe of track is alive today, where it was dead a lot when we were young. And I wanted to be a part of that because I feel like he deserves that. And I just wanted to be able to pass the torch on, you know, to maybe if he has a son, you know, or a daughter. But the main thing is I want him to know this one thing: that his daddy loved you. That's the ultimate goal.
That's the ultimate goal. That's right. You know, Casey, as we go through life, we end up having a lot of different roles that we play. For you, you've been a runner, you've been a track star, you are a record holder. Those are roles. Your son, maybe you're a spouse, you know, different jobs that we have, you know, salesman, etc. But the number one role that we'll ever have is dad. And that was the most interesting part of me having you on the show today was to be able to show and have you exemplify, be the example of the dad that you are for King, because that's the ultimate, again, the true win or lose. And you know, there's a lot more winning going on than losing here, but you know, we do lose. No one bats 100%, right? We do lose in some form or fashion. But with dad, you can win every day. And so I'm just so proud of you, what you do with him, not for him, with him and for him, but with him on a daily basis. You know, you had a lot of choices in your life where you could have made a lot of different choices, including what you do and how you do with him. But I know he's better for it because of the decisions you've made. You're better for it because of those decisions that you made to ultimately stick and be dad to King. That's the number one role over coach, buddy, friend, teacher, all that stuff. Dad is the ultimate role. And so just want to say how proud I am of you. We're so happy for you guys. We're excited to watch along in the journey. I mean, that's kind of the fun part about being a track and a track fan is, we get to see the journey. And no matter what, that kid, King, his life is better because of you. And so I just want to say thank you for being that example, and just grateful for you. And thank you for being here and sharing your side of the journey with us today.
I appreciate you. Thank you. I appreciate everything you do for the sport, and hopefully in the future, the sky's the limit on what we do.
We might have to do an update after, like after high school and then after college, when he goes to his first Olympics. We'll have to keep doing like little life updates, because no doubt you're going to be involved with it all the way, my friend.
I appreciate you.
All right. Have a good one, man.
Yes, sir.